My name is Diana Sterling. I am 77 years old, and my hands know the secret language of fabric. For 50 years, I was not just a lover of fashion. I was its custodian. I was the senior archivist for a legendary Parisian couture house, a name synonymous with timeless elegance. My world was a quiet, climate-controlled sanctuary of silk, of tweed, of hand-sewn sequins that held the stories of a century. I did not deal in trends, I dealt in history. To me, a dress was never just a dress. It was a primary source document. A well-tailored suit was a piece of architecture. The precise cut of a lapel could tell you more about a decade than any history book. My life's work was to preserve these beautiful, fragile artifacts, to protect the narrative of craftsmanship and artistry from the vulgar, screaming chaos of the disposable world. My late husband, Richard, was a man who understood this. He was a financier, a man of numbers and logic, but he had a poet's soul. He saw the value in things that last. Together, we built a life and a considerable fortune on this shared principle of investing in true, enduring value. Our home was a quiet testament to this philosophy, filled with classic furniture, first edition books, and the few perfect pieces of couture I had collected over a lifetime. Our only son, Julian, is a product of a different age. He was born into the comfort our work provided, and as such, he has never understood the concept of enduring value. He is a man who chases the shiny, the new, the trending. His life has been a series of ambitious but shallow ventures. A cryptocurrency scheme, a line of designer sneakers, an art gallery that showed only digital art. Each one, funded by us, has crashed and burned, leaving behind nothing but a trail of debt and a fresh, desperate need for the next big thing. He married Victoria, a woman who is the high priestess of the disposable. She is beautiful, fiercely ambitious, and her entire identity is constructed from the flimsy, logo-splattered fabric of fast fashion and social media. She does not see a dress, she sees a look. She does not see a handbag, she sees a status symbol. To her, my world of archives, of history, of quiet, handmade elegance, is not just old-fashioned. It is a personal affront, a dusty, irrelevant relic that embarrasses her. After Richard passed, and Julian's latest venture, a disastrous attempt to launch an influencer marketing agency, imploded, they came to me in a state of carefully curated desperation. They were homeless, they said, having lost their trendy downtown loft. They needed a place to stay, just for a little while, just to get back on their feet. My heart, the foolish maternal part of me that saw not a 35-year-old failure, but the little boy I had once read stories to, made them an offer. Years ago, Richard and I, as a purely strategic real estate investment, had quietly purchased a beautiful, pre-war apartment building in the city's most desirable neighborhood. We bought it through a discreetly named LLC, Sterling Holdings Group, and had a management company handle the day-to-day. It was my secret, solid, and very profitable nest egg. There's a lovely 2-bedroom available at the Beaumont, I had told them, intentionally using the building's name and not my own. I can pull some strings with the owners, get you a good rate, just until you're stable again. The good rate was a fraction of the market rent, a sum I secretly subsidized myself every month. They signed the lease agreement with the anonymous Sterling Holdings Group, never bothering to read the fine print, never questioning their good fortune. They were simply taking what they believed was their due. They moved in, and the little while stretched into 3 years. I was not just their mother and their benefactor. I was now, in secret, their landlady. I was sacrificing not just my money to maintain their lifestyle, but also the truth, allowing them to live in a fiction where they were the masters of their own fashionable world. I did not realize that my silence was not seen as a gift, but as the weakness of an old woman who could be easily managed. The humiliation, when it came, was as sharp and as public as a flashbulb in a dark room. It was an assassination of the soul, disguised as a party. Victoria had, through a series of machinations I could only dimly understand, managed to get herself featured in a local glossy magazine's Women of Style issue. The feature was, of course, photographed in her beautiful pre-war apartment at the Beaumont, the apartment I was paying for. To celebrate this milestone, she decided to throw a party. I was invited, of course. My presence was required. I was a necessary, if slightly embarrassing, prop, the doting mother-in-law who would complete the picture of her perfect, successful life. I thought long and hard about what to wear. It was a battlefield, and my clothing was my armor. I chose a piece of history. A simple, exquisitely cut, black boucle jacket from Chanel's 1962 collection. It had been a gift from Richard on our 10th wedding anniversary. It was a museum piece, a quiet, powerful statement of timeless elegance. To me, it was a piece of my heart. The apartment was filled with Victoria's tribe. A flock of brightly colored, noisy birds, all sharp angles, loud opinions, and the fleeting chemical scent of new clothes. They spoke a language I did not understand, a dialect of brand names and social media trends. I stood in a corner of the living room I had once helped Richard choose the paint for, a quiet, gray ghost in a sea of vibrant, disposable fashion. The moment came when Victoria was holding court. Her magazine feature passed from hand to eager hand. A friend of hers, a young woman with neon pink hair, pointed at me. "Vicky, darling," she said, her voice a high, piercing thing. "Who is your adorable vintage friend?" Victoria turned to me, and her smile was a weapon. It was a bright, dazzling, and utterly merciless thing. She glided over to me, a glass of champagne in her hand. "This," she announced to her circle of followers, "is Julian's mother, Diana. She used to work in fashion, can you believe it?" She said the words "used to," as if she were describing a forgotten, extinct civilization. Then, she let her eyes drift down to my jacket. Her perfectly sculpted nose wrinkled, just a fraction. "And that's one of her archival pieces," she said, the word archival, a synonym for fossilized. She then did something I will never, ever forget. She reached out, and with two perfectly manicured fingers, she plucked at the sleeve of my Chanel jacket as if it were a dusty cobweb. "It's a classic," she said, her voice dripping with a sweet, poisonous condescension. "But it smells a little of mothballs, darling. We need to get you into something a bit more, now." And then she turned to a nearby chair, where a cheap, brightly colored, mass-produced pashmina, a party favor for the guests, was draped. She picked it up. It was a garish, acrylic thing, the kind of throwaway item that would be in a landfill within a year. She draped it over my shoulders, covering the perfect, timeless lines of my jacket. "There," she said, with a triumphant, patronizing smile, turning me to face her friends. "That's better. A pop of color. Now you look like you belong in this century." The circle of young women tittered with polite, cruel laughter. My son, Julian, stood beside her, a weak, proud smile on his face. He was not just allowing this, he was endorsing it. He was proud of his clever, fashionable wife for so skillfully managing his embarrassing, out-of-date mother. In that moment, under the weight of that cheap, insulting piece of acrylic, something inside me broke. It was not my heart. It was the dam of my patience, the one that had held back a lifetime of quiet, simmering resentment. She had not just insulted my clothes. She had taken my history, my expertise, my life's work, my memory of my husband, and she had declared it all worthless. She had tried to erase me, to cover me up, to update me with her own cheap, disposable version of the world. I did not cause a scene. I did not throw the cheap shawl on the floor. I stood there for a moment, letting the full, searing force of the humiliation burn itself into my memory. And then I smiled. It was a small, serene, and utterly cold smile. "Thank you, Victoria," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "You are right. It is time for an update, a complete and total renovation." I turned, the cheap pashmina still draped over my shoulders like a shroud, and I walked out of that party, out of that apartment. They thought they had won. They thought they had put the old woman in her place. They had no idea that the quiet, vintage archivist had just been replaced by a very modern and very motivated landlady. The lease, I decided, was up for a major and immediate renegotiation. I walked out of the Beaumont, the cheap acrylic shawl still draped over my shoulders. It felt like a brand of shame. I got into the waiting taxi, and as the car pulled away from the curb, I looked up at the brightly lit window of the apartment, my apartment, where the party was still in full, glittering swing. I could hear the faint thumping of the music, the sound of their laughter. They were celebrating their victory over me, over the past, over the very concept of enduring value. In the quiet, anonymous darkness of the taxi, I took off the shawl. I held it in my hands. It was staticky, poorly made, and it had a faint, chemical smell. It was a perfect symbol of their world, cheap, loud, and utterly disposable. I rolled it into a tight ball, and when the taxi stopped at a red light, I opened the door and dropped it into a public trash can on the corner. It was a small act, but it was a beginning. A cleansing. The archivist in me, the woman who had spent a lifetime preserving the beautiful and the meaningful, was gone. The mother in me, the woman who had made endless excuses for her son, was gone. They had died in that apartment, smothered under a cheap pashmina and a wave of cruel laughter. In their place sat a different woman. She was not an archivist. She was not a mother. She was Sterling Holdings Group, LLC, and she was about to conduct a thorough and rather brutal portfolio review. My mind, the mind that could catalog and cross-reference 50 years of Couture, began to work with a cold, clear, and exhilarating logic. The grief, the humiliation, it was all there, a hot, painful core in my chest. But I did not allow it to become a flood of messy, useless emotion. I channeled it. It became the fuel for a cold, clean, and perfectly efficient engine of consequence. Assessment. I am the sole, anonymous owner of the Beaumont, a high-value real estate asset. My son Julian and his wife Victoria are tenants in this asset, occupying a premium unit, #7B, at a massively subsidized rent, a subsidy I have been personally funding. This subsidy is a non-performing asset, a poor investment that has yielded not gratitude, but contempt. Breach of contract. While the lease agreement is a standard one, the unwritten contract of familial decency has been spectacularly, publicly, and irrevocably breached. Their actions have demonstrated a profound lack of respect for me, the benefactor, and for the asset they occupy. Its strategic objective: to terminate the non-performing investment, to restore the asset to its full market potential, to reallocate my resources towards a more deserving portfolio, and, as a necessary byproduct, to introduce my tenants to the bracing, educational, and long overdue concept of the real world. Methodology, the beauty of the system Richard and I had created, was its anonymity. I did not need to confront them. I did not need to have a single messy, emotional conversation. I could simply be the landlord. I would operate through the established channels, the property management company that served as the public face of Sterling Holdings Group. The response would not be personal. It would be professional. It would be a simple, standard, and utterly devastating business decision. The plan formed, clean and elegant in its simplicity. It was a two-pronged attack, a perfectly tailored suit of consequences. 1. Rent adjustment. Their lease was, I knew, coming up for its annual renewal in 6 weeks. It was a standard contract, which meant the landlord had the right to adjust the rent to market rate with 30 days' notice. Their current, subsidized rent was a joke. The market rate for a 2-bedroom in the Beaumont was nearly 3 times what they were paying. An adjustment was not just a right, it was a fiduciary duty to my own financial health. Call. The penthouse gambit. The penthouse apartment, the crown jewel of the Beaumont, had been vacant for a month. I knew, because Julian had mentioned it in a whiny, entitled phone call, that they had been coveting it. They had already submitted an application to the management company, assuming that their special relationship with the building's owners would guarantee them the upgrade. Their plan was to move into the penthouse and turn their current apartment into a studio space for Victoria's brand. I would now have the distinct pleasure of responding to that application. I arrived home. My quiet, elegant apartment, filled with the things Richard and I had loved, felt like a command center. I did not sleep. I sat at my antique desk, a cup of strong black tea at my side, and I began to draft the letters. I did not write them as a mother. I wrote them as the faceless, implacable entity of Sterling Holdings Group. The language was precise, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the language of business, the language of consequence. The following Monday morning, I did not call my son. I called Mr. Henderson, the senior property manager for Sterling Holdings Group. He was a brisk, efficient man who had no idea I was anything other than a wealthy, elderly client who owned the building. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice crisp and professional. "Diana Sterling here. I am calling to discuss the upcoming lease renewal for Unit 7B. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Sterling," he said. The Sterlings, good tenants, always pay on time. Of course they did. I was the one funding the payments. Their lease is up for renewal on the 1st of next month. Is that correct? I asked. Yes, that's right. We were about to send them the standard renewal offer at the same rate. There's been a change of plans, I said. Effective immediately, the preferential rate for Unit 7B is terminated. Please prepare a new lease offer that reflects the full current market value for that unit. No exceptions. There was a moment of surprised silence on the other end of the line. The full market rate? He stammered. That's a significant increase, Mrs. Sterling. It's more than triple their current rent. I'm aware of the numbers, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice as cold as ice. I am a businesswoman. The asset is underperforming. We are correcting the valuation. Is that a problem? No, ma'am, he said, his voice suddenly much more respectful. Not a problem at all. I'll draw up the new offer immediately. Good, I said. Now, regarding the penthouse, I see we have an application from the tenants in 7B. Yes, they've been very persistent, he said, a note of weariness in his voice. Their application is to be denied, I said. Please inform them that the penthouse has been leased to another party. Effective immediately. Leased, but we haven't even shown it yet. We have now, I said. The new tenant is a personal project of mine. A young artist. She will be taking occupancy on the 1st of the month. She will be paying a preferential rate. I paused. And Mr. Henderson, you will extend to her every possible courtesy. She is very important to the ownership of this building. Of course, Mrs. Sterling, he said, a new, profound respect in his voice. He now saw me not as a dotty old woman, but as a ruthless, powerful player. Send out the official notifications today, I said, and hung up the phone. The trap was set. The beauty of it was its impersonality. I did not have to say a word. The system I had created, the buffer of the management company, would deliver the news in the cold, hard, undeniable language of a business letter. The letters, I knew, would arrive in their mailbox the next day. A Tuesday. I imagined the scene. They would come home from their important lives, flush with the social victory of their party. They would sort through the mail, and they would find 2 envelopes from the property management office of the Beaumont. The first would be the rejection. A polite, professional form letter informing them that their application for the penthouse had been denied, as the unit was no longer available. A sting of disappointment. An insult to their ego. But the second letter would be the kill shot. The official lease renewal offer. I could picture their faces as they read the new number, the new, brutal, unsubsidized monthly rent. I could imagine the confusion turning to disbelief, then to sputtering, apoplectic rage. The rage of the entitled when the free ride suddenly, inexplicably, comes to a screeching halt. Their world, the beautiful, fashionable, and entirely fraudulent world they had built inside the walls of my building, was about to be served with an eviction notice from reality itself. They would be forced to confront a truth they had spent their entire lives avoiding, that a look has a price and a lifestyle has a cost. And I, their silent, invisible, and out-of-date landlady, was about to present them with the bill. The call came on Wednesday evening. I was in my quiet apartment, cataloging a small collection of vintage Dior sketches I had recently acquired at auction. The phone rang, and the caller ID showed Julian's name. I let it ring for a long, satisfying moment. Then I answered, my voice a calm, neutral, and slightly curious. "Hello, Mother," he shouted, his voice a high-pitched panic squeal of pure outrage. "Have you seen this? Did you know about this?" "Know about what, dear?" I asked, feigning a gentle confusion. "The Beaumont. The management company. They've lost their minds. They've tripled our rent. And they've given the penthouse to someone else. After I told them we wanted it. It's an insult. It's a catastrophe." I let him rant. I listened as he spun a tale of corporate incompetence and personal injustice. He was the victim, the wronged party. It did not once in his entire tirade occur to him that this might be a consequence of his own actions. "That does sound distressing, Julian," I said when he finally paused for breath. My tone was one of mild grandmotherly concern. Distress. "It's a disaster," he wailed. "We can't afford this. We'll be ruined. We'll have to move. Mother, you have to do something. You know the owners, right? You said you pulled some strings. You have to call them. You have to fix this. Tell them they have to give us back our old rate. Tell them they have to give us the penthouse." And there it was. The demand, the assumption, the unshakable, lifelong belief that I was his personal fixer, the backstage manager of his life, the woman who would always clean up his messes. I let a long, thoughtful silence hang in the air. "I see," I said finally. "So you'll call them?" he asked, his voice full of a desperate, hopeful relief. "What? What do you mean you won't?" he stammered, the confusion returning. "But why not?" "Because, my dear," I said, savoring each word, "there is no one to call." "What are you talking about?" "Of course there's someone to call. The owner. Sterling Holdings Group, or whatever they're called." And then I played my final devastating card. I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat. I simply stated a fact, with the calm, dispassionate authority of an archivist reading a catalog entry. "Julian," I said, "I am Sterling Holdings Group." The silence on the other end of the line was the most profound and the most satisfying I have ever heard. It was a silence so complete, so total, that I could almost hear the sound of his entire world, his entire understanding of his own life, collapsing into a black hole of pure, horrifying revelation. I could picture his face, the dawning comprehension, the memory of the party, the memory of my face, of his wife's casual, brutal cruelty, the realization that the quaint, out-of-date old woman he had allowed to be humiliated was the same person who held the deed to his home, the lease to his life. "Waylon?" "You?" he finally whispered, the word a puff of air, the sound of a man who has been punched in the soul. "Yes, me," I said. "I am your landlady. And as your landlady, I have made a business decision. The subsidy is over. Your tenancy is now a matter of pure, simple, and unsubsidized economics. You will pay the market rate, or you will be evicted. The choice is yours." I heard a sound in the background, Victoria's sharp, inquisitive voice. "What is it? What did she say?" And then Julian's muffled, choked reply. "She's the owner. It's her. It's all her." Then came a new sound. Victoria's shriek. It was not a sound of anger. It was a sound of pure, primal terror. The sound of a woman who has just realized that the foundation of her entire, glittering, fashionable world is made of quicksand, and she is sinking. Fast. "The penthouse, by the way," I added, my voice as calm as a summer morning, "has been leased. The new tenant is a very talented and very deserving young textile designer. I feel it's important to support true, emerging artistry, don't you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. I could hear them in the background, their voices now a rising cacophony of panic and mutual recrimination. The beautiful, stylish couple was imploding. "I have to go now, Julian," I said, my voice cool and final. "I have archives to attend to. Your formal 30-day notice will be in the mail tomorrow." And I hung up the phone. I did not slam it down. I placed it gently back in its cradle. The archivist had made her final entry. The file on my son's long, subsidized childhood was now, officially and forever, closed. My old life ended that day, with the sound of my son's world breaking over the phone. My new life began the following week, with a quiet, joyful meeting in the lobby of the Beaumont. They moved out, of course. They had no choice. They could not afford the new rent, and their pride, the only real currency they had ever possessed, was in tatters. I did not see them go. The property manager handled the final inspection. I heard, through the grapevine, that they had moved into a small, nondescript apartment in a suburb far from the fashionable world they had once tried to conquer. Julian, for the first time in his life, was forced to get a real 9-to-5 job. And Victoria, stripped of her glamorous stage and her endless source of funding, saw her social media presence and her social standing wither and die. They were no longer the women of style. They were just another struggling couple, drowning in the quiet, unfashionable reality of their own choices. My new life began with the penthouse. I met the new tenant, the young textile designer, in the lobby to give her the keys. Her name was Anya. She was brilliant, passionate, and her eyes, when she saw the apartment for the first time, shone with a pure, unadulterated joy that I had not seen in years. I don't understand," she had stammered, looking at the lease agreement with its symbolic $1 a month rent. "Why me?" "Because," I had replied, smiling, "I believe in investing in things that last. And your work will last." The penthouse of the Beaumont, once the ultimate symbol of my son's shallow ambition, was transformed. It became a bustling, creative studio filled with looms and bolts of fabric, and the vibrant, chaotic energy of true creation. Anya's work flourished. She became one of the most exciting young designers in the city. And her success, her genuine, hard-won success, brought me 1,000 times more joy than my son's fraudulent performance ever had. I did not stop there. I, Sterling Holdings Group, began a new acquisitions program. I began to quietly buy up small, struggling retail spaces in up-and-coming neighborhoods. And I began to lease them, at subsidized rates, to young, talented, and struggling artists, designers, and artisans. The Beaumont became the flagship of a small, quiet empire of creativity. My life is no longer about preserving the past. It is about funding the future. My days are filled with studio visits, with portfolio reviews, with conversations about art and color and the beautiful, enduring power of a well-made thing. I am not a mother anymore, not in the old, sacrificial sense. I am a patron, a mentor, a different kind of custodian. This evening, I am hosting a small dinner party in my own, quiet apartment. The guests are Anya, the textile designer from the penthouse, a young ceramicist from one of my downtown properties, and a brilliant shoemaker who is reinventing the art of handmade shoes in a small workshop I now own in the old Tannery district. We are drinking good wine. We are eating a simple, perfect meal. And we are talking about art, about history, about the importance of protecting the beautiful, the authentic, and the true from a world that is obsessed with the cheap, the fast, and the fake. I looked at their bright, passionate faces, and I felt a sense of peace, a sense of purpose, that I thought I had lost forever. I had spent a lifetime archiving the finished works of masters. I had now, finally, become a patron of the masters of the future. My son and his wife had tried to update me, to cover my history with their own cheap, disposable present. But they had failed, because true style, like true art, is not about what is new. It is about what endures. And I, like the vintage Chanel jacket that still hangs in my closet, have not only endured. I have, in the end, proven to be priceless.